If you are an angry person and you're always putting forth anger, what you're going to find around you all the time is angry people. Angry situations that magnify the anger that you already have.
Dr. Hairfield now lectures about spiritual topics such as the power of thought and the benefits of meditation, as well as writes books and is dedicated to helping those who are in search of their original self-nature. His latest book, The 12 Sacred Principles of Karma, which addresses the different aspects of this universal law. We began by asking what motivated him to write this text on karma.
And the reason for it is extremely interesting. This part of the world knows very little about the idea of karma. We hear the idea of law of attraction, but we don't really know how it works. What we don't understand is in each and everything that we do, we create the same things. We are the cause in our lives, and our lives are the effect of what we indeed have created. So I wrote it because it's a real important idea in the Eastern world. I wrote it with the Western mind in the way that we view things, so that people could understand how they could truly become empowered in their own lives. And karma can help one do that. People don't realize that it's a very genuine idea in life, because we have an effect in everything that we do. Look at Newtonian physics. Newton, in his third law of motion, verifies the idea of karma. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And if we thoroughly understand our own actions, we know exactly what the return result is going to be. That's what karma is about, and that's why I wrote it.
Doppler radar is a weather forecasting tool, and this technology involves radio waves bouncing back to an antenna after hitting objects like raindrops. The time it takes for the waves to travel back and the frequency of the return signal helps scientists determine in what ways weather patterns are developing. Dr. Hairfield says a scientific principle known as the Doppler effect and the karmic system have much in common.
Well, actually, the Doppler effect has its basis in karma. When Dr. Doppler was working on the Doppler radar system, which is what we use to determine our weather patterns today, he was stumped, and he took a walk, sat down on a park bench, and he began to pick up pebbles, and he would throw them into a pool, and he would watch them. He would see these ripples go out, and he thought, well, they seem to go out just a certain distance. What happens to them? So he went back into his lab and set up under controlled means the effects of what happened with all of those ripples. And here's the intriguing thing. And this is how Doppler radar came about. Wherever you threw that pebble into that pool, the ripples would go out to each of the sides, all the way to the bottom, and they would always return to the same spot where the pebble entered. So it's not that they disappeared. In other words, the ripple effect just became so subtle it was lost to the naked eye. But under control means and computer monitoring, they always returned. No matter where it hit the water, those ripples would go to every place and come back. Now let's look at karma. Your act is the pebble that hits the pool of life. And it spreads everywhere, goes in all directions. When it finds all of its like kind that matches your thought, it comes back to you from all sides and all at once. So you could say Doppler effect and karma are identical, but Doppler demonstrated it in a physics lab, how karma actually works. What you think, what you feel, what you do, and what you say. Every one of those plants a seed of Doppler coming back to you.
To many, the term karma is associated with a system of rewards and punishments, and Dr. Hairfield wishes to inform the world that the meaning of this word is much deeper.
Actually, karma is the catch-all word, and it breaks down into some 12 operating principles within the idea of karma. The first thing I think a lot of people have to understand is karma is not a punishing idea. It was never intended for that. The first principle of karma says, what you sow, so shall you reap. What you sow, so shall you reap is what you plant in your life is what's going to come back to you. So we can look at karma as an equalizer, not as a punisher. Karma is the very thing that makes sure that the playing field of life stays level and equal in all things.
How does the law of karma operate and thus affect our lives?
If we fully understand the total implications of what karma is going to do to a person, I am very genuine and sincere when I say we would not do half of what we do. One of the things I point out in the book is if you think someone is a bonehead, very short time after that, you're going to have your own personal bonehead experience because that's what you thought of that person. That's a seed that you planted, it came to fruition, and it came back to you. If you look at a person that steals something, I can promise you, karma is going to strike them in a variety of ways. One, they're going to have things stolen from them. Two, their trust is totally gone because now they can trust no one. All of those are simply results of karma. And if we learn to appreciate the attributes of karma and realize that it is just a simple thing that keeps the playing field level, then we would keep it level on our own. In a monastery, when a monk does a thing, no matter what it is, they already know the end result, and they're simply there to greet it. They know always what's going to occur because of what they do. Now, if we all had that knowledge, it would make a different world, which is what I'm after.
Once we have created bad karma, is there anything we can do to counteract it and avoid its eventual results? Here is Dr. Hairfield's perspective.
You cannot run from karma. It is not possible. You see, there is no good, no bad, no right, no wrong. That's all human illusion. That's what we determine it to be. It's bad because we don't like it. It's good because we do. But does that make a difference? You're going to have the experience based on what you sowed, and now you have to reap. And that's your karma coming back at you. And people just don't like that karma coming back at them. But there's no way anybody can get around it or away from it. Like the law of avoidance, the essence of it is wherever you go, there you are. We spend more time not acknowledging ourselves, attempting to avoid ourselves, as opposed to accepting who we really are. But that principle of karma is always reminding you precisely who you are.
So the cliche when bad things happen to good people, is that cleaning up karma from a past life?
Actually, you could say that. I share with people all the time, people that are very spiritually oriented, very spiritually minded, that I found well over 90% of them had really horrendous or extremely difficult childhoods. Everything from sexually molested to physically abused, mentally abused, emotionally abused, you name it. Well, what they don't realize is they were getting all of that historical karma out of the way when they were children. But what most of them have failed to do is let it go. They still hold on to it, and they remember what all of that was, and they don't realize that what they're doing is constantly repeating it in their present.
Dr. Hairfield described how the law of karma can be explained through 12 equally important principles. He says these principles serve as a roadmap in helping us to realize the essence of life, and once we fully understand these different aspects of karma, we can be truly empowered in our lives. The 12 principles are: the great principle, creation, humility, growth, the mirrors, synchronicity, direction and motives, willingness, here and now, change, patience and reward, value and upliftment. Today, Dr. Hairfield will introduce some of the core concepts of karma as discussed in his book, beginning with what he calls the great principle. As you sow, so shall you reap.
If you understand the great principle, then you'll easily understand the rest of them. If we looked at every single act, action, thought, or word, or emotion that you have as a seed, so to speak, and you plant that seed, what do you want to harvest? What do you want out of that crop? You plant in the present. It grows tomorrow. It's your garden, and you are the only one that can harvest in it. No one else can.
The principle of creation.
The principle of creation. That's the power that we all have. You have created every single second of every single minute of every single hour of every single day of your life in exactly the way that you want it. The concept behind the principle of creation is also personal ownership of what you have created. I cannot blame you for anything. I can only own what I have created, own what I feel. That's not up to you to control. So if a car, a bank account, a house makes you happy, if your children, your husband makes you happy, you do not have any control of your happiness at all. Zero. Everything you feel, everything you think is a result of a karmic return. I'm the one that generated it in the first place. See, when we have events that occur in our life, it's to educate us. Only you can change the circumstances.
The principle of humility. The principle of humility is summed up in this phrase: what you resist persists for you. In other words, we create our own difficulties, in particular through negative thoughts or emotions. Dr. Hairfield learned the lesson of humility while he was a monk in a Tibetan monastery. There he was made to confront his greatest opponent, fear.
I'll share the story of the tiger, how he and I met. I was out in the fields one day, and Master Lobsang said, "Young man, what's your greatest fear?" And I said, "A slow, agonizing death." A few days later, I went out the front door of the monastery, and I was about 20 feet away from the door, and there was this Bengal tiger just standing in the middle of the path, and I froze. I was 20 feet from the door. It's almost 100 yards from me, so I could have made it to the door very easily. And I want to tell you something. I could not move. And I thought, well, if I stand here frozen, it won't see me. And I'm looking down this path, and all of a sudden, he starts moving very slowly, one paw at a time. And then he started going a little faster and a little faster, and I still absolutely could not move. And the last thing I remembered was seeing this cat just springing into the air. Now, I weigh about 168 pounds. This tiger was about 400 pounds, and it landed right on me. I'm screaming and hollering. This cat's licking my head, got its teeth in my skull, and I never realized it wasn't biting me. And then all of a sudden, I heard laughter. And I get this cat off my head, and I turned around and looked, and there's Lobsang, the Lama Kaila, and two other monks. They were just laughing hysterically. And when I was down at the river washing out my robes, you know what happened. Lobsang and the tiger walked down, and Lobsang told me the story. The cat's mom had been poached, and they found it at the front door of the monastery, and they raised it from a 2-month-old tiger. And all it knew was monks. But I had the best friend, and I was cured totally of death, and especially a slow, agonizing one. So what does that have to do with karma? Karma, or fear, is the biggest holdback in karma, and what it will do to you ultimately. If a person lives fearfully, then they will always bring to themselves things that create fear within them, and everything becomes magnified.
The principle of growth.
The greatest level of growth happens internally and not externally. The law of growth is getting a person to move forward in their lives. Instead of looking always at things you don't have, why not appreciate what you do have? Okay, that's where your growth will actually occur the greatest. We are divine creatures. An angry person cannot shift the anger until they recognize the fact that they are. So the law of growth is about making sure that we do change.
The principle of the mirrors. This principle says our life experiences always reflect back to us exactly who we are in any given moment.
The fifth principle, where you have the law of the mirrors, that's actually broken down into 7 different reflections. Life is always showing you exactly who you are, which is why blame is an exercise in futility. There's no need for conflict. Why? You have your experience, I have my experience, and we all look at life through our historical experience. What has happened before determines how you see things today. And if we don't like our lives, all we have to do is shift our perspective, our actions and our activities into a different dynamic. And when we do, and we do it with intention, our entire lives change. There's no way around that at all. And here's the funny thing. You can work out karma in this lifetime, or the universe will wait, and you work it out in another lifetime. Or another, or another.
The principle of synchronicity. Synchronicity is about living in equality, peace, and harmony.
I think the greatest interrupter of synchronicity is judgment. The law of synchronicity is more about the idea of something we chatted about earlier, and that's that there is no good, there is no bad, there is no right, there is no wrong. There just is life, and it's all in how we tend to see it. Synchronicity is the true harmonic of life. Synchronicity is not being owned by anything outside you, is not ever attempting to prove yourself or to be something that you're not. And most people, especially in this part of the world, are always attempting to be who they aren't as opposed to who they are. The law of synchronicity is more about truth and error. When you're walking on the path of truth, you have synchronicity. When you walk on the path of error, you have struggle. Mm-hmm. And all error is a steering mechanism to take you back to synchronicity.
The principle of direction and motives.
It's more about intention. If your motive wasn't of the deepest of integrity, all right, your direction is going to change into a direction that you didn't anticipate. The intention that you're putting into a thing is the seed that's going to create the direction.
The principle of willingness.
How about the principle of willingness?
In the 12 principles, they get more subtle as they go along. And in the law of willingness, basically is being willing to face yourself. You planted the garden. Now you've got all these weeds in that garden. It's required for you to remove them. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to change routines of your own minds? Are you willing to shift your emotions to bring you a greater experience? I can promise you one thing. Whatever you're unwilling to do is going to be constantly in front of you until you do it.
The principle of the present moment.
If you can learn to master the idea of keeping your mind and thoughts right behind your eyes, you'll never worry again. What causes worry is when we look into the future or we look into the past. But if you learn to stay in the present moment, there's never anything to worry about.
The principle of patience and reward.
The point is whenever you're impatient about anything, that you will always be faced with impatient situations. In other words, it becomes more and more magnified. But the more patient you are about any and everything, the more rewarding life is. It's amazing in how much impatience actually blocks almost virtually any event in your life. A lot of people are impatient. They want to have love in their life, so they get in a hurry, and they get in a relationship that turns out to be the worst nightmare. Well, there's no reward in that. If you're patient in all things, it's always much more rewarding and much more healthy in your mind and in your emotions and in your body at the same time.
The principle of value and upliftment.
The essence of it is every person there is value, and it's our function to always lift people by being in service to people, not taking from. I mean, if I'm walking down the street and I see somebody in tears, it's always my desire to only help them if I can. If there's some way that I can, then I will. I just won't walk by. I just won't leave them there. That's the value of upliftment. We can't get away from ourselves. We cannot get away from cause and effect. But what we can do is live in a loving manner as that loving cause, and then have love returned to us, because that's the only thing that can happen. We have that much direct influence in life. We are the sole reason that our lives are the way that it is.
We thus begin with concept of fate. Do we really have free will in our lives, or is everything set by destiny? Dr. Hairfield shares his nuggets of wisdom.
My teachers one day started explaining to me about destiny. We think we have this thing called free will. What we have is choice. And we tend to confuse choice with free will. Because if there's a destiny or a fate, how does free will fit in that? It doesn't. Because you're going to live that destiny in this lifetime or another one. And it's just up to you when you decide to do it. It's as simple as that. With spending years going, there is no way I'm going to do that. And yet, all the circumstances led up into me doing exactly what I do today. So we all have a destiny. We're all going to live that destiny, sooner or later.
Many people fervently search for their soulmate, believing this person will make them happy in life. Dr. Hairfield cautions that there is a world of difference between a soulmate and what he calls a twin flame, or someone who loves us without judgment and for who we are.
If you look for a soulmate, you could find your worst nightmare. And you're attracted to this person, and all of a sudden it turns out to be the worst relationship you've ever had. What you don't realize is you played the karmic debt out. There's no longer a karmic debt between you two. I asked one of my teachers in India one day about relationships and the idea of love, and his answer was beautifully simple. He said, Stephen, love does not know time, nor does it know distance. It only knows itself. That when you find that true partner, that true flame, you will know it within a matter of seconds. And then you'll spend the rest of your life learning to know each other. And that, to me, is the difference between a soulmate and a twin flame. A soulmate can be your worst nightmare, and a twin flame will never be that.
We also asked Dr. Hairfield about the nature of consciousness and its different aspects.
How about that consciousness versus clarity of consciousness? You mentioned a little bit about clarity of consciousness.
We all have consciousness. We just don't use it. Clarity of consciousness is where we no longer have old baggage that we hold to, which shades, shapes, and jades what we see. You talk with a lady, as an example, that let's say she's had difficult experiences in relationships. So today she has a hard time trusting a male. How can she ever have a fulfilling relationship as long as she cannot trust that male? And here's the funny thing. Because she doesn't trust the man, she's always going to attract men to her that she can't trust in the first place until she gets over it. That's an unclear consciousness. Once she steps into clarity of consciousness, she trusts individuals just for who they are and not for who they aren't. We all look at potential when we look at people instead of the reality of the person. Potential is only potential until it's realized and lived. Other than that, it's chasing an illusion. So clarity of consciousness is living in truth and chasing nothing, and allowing life to come to you, because it does and it will.
What the a global pool? What is that?
Global pool. That's every single thought that every single human that's ever lived has put out into consciousness.
Every single one?
Yes, ma'am. Here's the interesting thing, that once you think a thought, it stays out there in consciousness until it finds its like kind, and then like Doppler, it returns to you. So the collective pool is all human consciousness consciousness can be used for communication just like you and I are doing right now. And it doesn't matter where in the world you or I sit, we can still link consciously. So once we become aware of consciousness as a vehicle and as a mechanism, we can now use it for that mechanism. I mean, the sole reason I ended up in India was from that vehicle. So when we look at the world today and collective consciousness today, that consciousness is in turmoil. Why? Because human is in turmoil. And if people aren't careful, they're going to allow themselves individually to get into greater turmoil. Why? Because right now, most people are unconscious of that connection with it. People that are otherwise very peaceful are becoming very violent today. Why? Because of them or because of consciousness? It's a reflection of one to the other. One to the other. Which one is in dominance? So, conscious clarity would be knowing who you are.
Being conscious that we are connected inside to the rest of humankind and the universe is part of a journey to self-mastery. But what constitutes full self-mastery? Dr. Hairfield shares his view.
Understanding and implicitly accepting yourself. Self-mastery is removing all illusion and living authentically within your own self, within only who you are. When we were on the way to Tibet, one of my teachers said to me, 14 of us in a single file, "Stephen, you sound like an elephant stomping through the jungle. Come up here." And he said, "Do you know how you walk?" And I said, "Yes." And he laughed and said, "No, you don't. How do you breathe? How do your feet touch the ground? What's your stride? How do you move? What are your arms doing?" I couldn't answer any of those. And he said to me this, "Move back in line and pay very close attention to all moves you make and remove all wasted movement." And about an hour later, I heard from up front, "Good. I no longer sounded like an elephant." But when you say, what is self-mastery? It's knowing yourself implicitly in any and everything that you do. How you move, how you think, how you feel, and allow nothing to be in control of you in any of those moments. Nothing. And if your emotions and your mind are always the same, life no longer has a hold on you. Then you've mastered you.
What is the relationship between bad karma and illness? Dr. Hairfield teaches that disease is an outward manifestation of the fact that one's inner life is not in balance.
In some parts of the world, the closest thing you're going to get to a doctor is a monk. And they are wizards when it comes to herbs, so to speak. But they also understand the metaphorical representation of the body parts. Lungs represent the ability to receive. Liver and kidneys are the filters. The intestine are to digest foods. What we as humans don't realize is every cell in your body is controlled by your mind. And your cells resonate and vibrate to what you think and feel. So if you do not like you, you're already in the process of destroying your own self because you don't like you. So when we look at illness, that's a culmination of karma based in that part of the physiological aspect of that body. The fastest transmuter of karma actually happens to be cancer. Why do women get cancer, breast cancer, cervical or uterine cancer? Where do people store guilt in their bodies? Usually in the area that determines their gender. Testicular cancer is men that feel guilty and don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to release it, know how to get rid of it. But that's the result, again, of karma showing up in a physiological sense in the body. And it's a cumulative effect of what they've done.
So karma will show up in your body.
Oh, it does.
Not just events.
It's a universal truth, so it'll show up anywhere. It can show up in events, in people, in words, thoughts, deeds, actions, and in your body.
Finally, Dr. Hairfield wishes to offer these parting thoughts to our viewers.
It's not about what people have done to you. It's about what you do for others. And when you learn that the greatest value that you have is sharing the truth of you, not your perceptions, but the truth of who you are, with any person that comes along. And when you open your heart and you share that loving heart that you have, people cannot resist it. They just cannot. Find peace within you. It's never outside you. Whatever you seek, it's always within you, never away from you. Look in there first, and then share what you find with all people. That's what I would say.